Alright, so in this video, I got stories about transvestite tenants, about shopping malls, and why you need to have a great relationship with the tenants you put in your home.
I'm not broken, I'm just split into. I'm not broken, I'm just split into. I'm not broken, I'm just split into. The memory of you just come running by.
So one of the things that continually astounds me about landlording and property management are landlords that disrespect their tenants and have no clue who they are. These are two key things that guarantee you will have a terrible time as a landlord if you fall into these traps. So let's start off with the first one, knowing who your tenants are. This is key. It seems so obvious. If I'm going to put people in a home that I own, that's a big investment for me, it's a large part of my savings, I need to know who these people are. These people are becoming partners in a major venture in my life as a landlord. It doesn't matter how many properties you own. It doesn't even matter if you don't even interact with your tenants anymore. You still need to know on some kind of data basis who your tenants are. This boils down to tenant screenings. So right now, I screen for credit score, I screen for income, and I screen for work history. I have a set standard that I follow with every single tenant. Not only does this help avoid any kind of discrimination suit, more importantly than that, it's not just about self-protection from the law as a landlord. The more important part of it, you do need to follow the law, you need to follow housing law and make sure that you're compliant. But the bigger picture isn't to be compliant with the law, which is important. The bigger thing is you, as a landlord, now know who these people are that you could potentially be partnering with in a lease agreement on one of your major investments, one of your major assets. So I want to be able to commit to people who are in my houses, and so I need to make sure that this is someone worth getting into a landlord-tenant commitment with. And screening is the number one way to do that. So one, credit screening, right? Just like they say in the stock market, past performance is an indicator of future results. The same thing applies with a tenant, but a credit history is a good place to start. If somebody's digging themselves out of current delinquencies, if somebody's digging themselves out of credit problems, historically, this person hasn't necessarily made the best choices, and you can see in the credit history if maybe it was one thing or if it's a repeated, trend. You'll see that in the credit report, and you can make decisions appropriately based on what you find. But having that credit report will show you how this person has managed or mismanaged their finances in the past, which is going to be a likely predictor of how they're going to perform in the future with you as a landlord and with them as the tenant. So let me tell you a little story. I was looking at houses. I went to go look at a duplex. It was a rougher duplex. I didn't end up even making an offer on it. It was so rough. But the landlord, as we were going into the house, began prepping me with all these pejorative statements about his tenants. Right off the bat, we haven't even been in this guy's house, and he's already insulting his tenants. One of his tenants was transvestite. He had pejorative things to say about that. He had bad things to say about their hygiene, how I could anticipate seeing the home when I got in there. We haven't even walked into your house and you're already bad-mouthing your tenants. So we go in the house, and the landlord is repeatedly addressing the tenant, the primary tenant, as Michael. However, the other people in the house and the primary tenant, it's very clear that he goes by Mike. I'm talking to the tenant, seemed like a nice guy, good conversationalist, no problems, we're talking. So I was like, hey, is it Michael or Mike? He says, Mike. No big deal, right? I just want to address the tenant by his name. It seems appropriate. But when I built that rapport with the tenant, the landlord immediately became defensive and said something to the extent of, well, I can't keep up with who you feel like being each day. And it was just totally awkward. But the bigger point being, this landlord one, didn't respect the tenants in his house, and two, didn't even know who they were to respect or not respect them. So it was this disrespect that wasn't even based out of fact, it was based out of total ignorance. So another thing you need to screen for is income, right? How are people going to pay the rent if they don't make enough money to pay the rent? One of the easiest ways to screen for income is to have a multiple of the rent that you require in income. So I verify that my tenants make a certain amount times the monthly rent. So you take the rent times a certain multiple, and every one of my tenants makes that amount of money. This is important because if you're going to get in a relationship with somebody in one of your most important assets, something that you are using to save for your retirement, you need to make sure that they're going to be able to continue paying that obligation that they're signing up for. Also, I want to have a great relationship with my tenants. So I don't want them to be stressed when rent time comes due. And one of the ways I can make sure they're not stressed is by verifying that they actually make enough money to pay their rent every month without stretching their budget too thin. So screening for a multiple of income, so the rent times 3 times 3.5 times 4, anywhere in there is a good multiple to go ahead and screen for, but set that multiple and hold to it. This is going to ensure not only that you're going to get paid your rent, but just as importantly, that your tenants aren't going to be stressed when that rent time comes due. There's a great story in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. If you haven't read that book, you need to click the link down below and download that book. Listen to it on Audible, read a paper copy, something. But I've read this book 4 times in my life. Every time I change a major life stage, I reread the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Because it always applies just a little bit differently than the last time. Anyhow, there's a story in there about property managers who own a mall. Now, when you think about a mall, maybe you don't think about it the same way as a single family residential, but there's a lot of the same principles sound like they apply. One of the problems is the mall was having problems with their tenants. The stores that were renting the spaces in the mall continued to have problems. They weren't happy about their spaces. They were complaining about their rents. And the owners of the mall started to get to know the owners of the stores, their tenants. As the lines of communication opened between the mall and the tenants, relationships improved, vacancies reduced, and rents went up. This is key because if that's true of business-to-business relationship, how much more true is that with individual tenants living in your house, which is their home? The more you get to know your tenants, the more you'll understand their problems and the better you're going to be able to solve them. So that's a great story from 7 Habits of Highly Effective People that is very applicable to being a landlord of single family residentials. Check out that book, download it off the link down below. Appreciate it. So we've talked a little bit about the importance of screening for credit. We've also talked about the importance of screening for income. And so that gets us into just having a good relationship with your tenants. So why would you badmouth a tenant that you've already screened to make sure you know they're creditworthy? You've screened to make sure that they're able to pay their rent every month without stretching their budget too thin. And lastly, you chose to put them in your house. You, as the landlord, had the choice to do all of that. You picked them. So why, common sense wise, would you ever badmouth someone you chose to put in your house? So now you've selected them based on credit, you selected them based on income, you chose to put them in your house, and now by badmouthing them, you're choosing to have a bad relationship with someone that you committed to do business with for probably at least 12 months on a 12-month lease. So the only excuse is that you just want to have difficulty. You want to have difficulty, so get along with your tenants. You screen them, you chose them, you put them in there. Now have a great relationship with them. One, so you can enjoy your life, because if you don't enjoy working with the people you put in your house, you're going to be miserable as a landlord. So have a great time working with them, get to know them, so that way, if you can solve their problems or you can make their life in your home more enjoyable, you're going to have a more rewarding relationship. I think the biggest way this comes through is just figuring out the little things that are going to make the difference to make people happy, make them feel safe, make them comfortable, and make them enjoy, living in your home a little bit more. Because if you don't have that relationship and you just ask the question, what would it take for you to stay, to someone you haven't talked to for a year, you just collect the rent on the first of every month, and then 11 months later you're like, hey, your lease is coming up, what would it take for you to stay? Or what would it take for me to raise your rent? You're going to get answers probably like, a total remodel of this house. I need a new bathroom. I need the kitchen totally remodeled. I need you to name something else that's going to cost $25,000. No, it's not going to be worth it for you at that point to do something like that to keep them as a tenant, because you lost out on the best opportunity, which is just having a good relationship with the people you chose to do business with, to put in your house every month, and to work with them. So get to know your tenants, screen your tenants well, so it's somebody that's worth your time to get to know, so that way you can have an ongoing relationship with them, and when it comes time for their lease to expire, they want to stay with you and you want them to stay with you. You can look at the comparable rents in the area. You're probably gonna have to raise your rent appropriately, but it's gonna be something where you don't have to raise your rent too much, because you have good people in your house, and they're gonna be happy when you raise your rent less than the comparable houses are renting for in the neighborhood, and they're willing to stay even with that small rent raise. So screen your tenants, check their credit, check their income, and most importantly, have a great relationship with the people you put in your house.